Welcome everyone. We're here for Productivity Power Hour, and today the theme is going to be around Obsidian, specifically around the fact that I've been tossing around the idea of creating a course for Obsidian for quite some time, to be honest. And like push comes to shove, I was thinking about it over the weekend, and you know what? Heck, we are gonna make it happen. So don't get me wrong, we're not gonna plan the whole thing out today here in Obsidian, but I thought it'd be fun, especially with everyone here. And so with the course, I'd like to find out what you all would like to learn from the course, what you would expect from it. We're gonna basically plan it in Obsidian for those who are looking for Obsidian tips or how I might manage things. We're gonna get to do that. So it's gonna be a pretty packed stream, honestly. We're talking about some education design, project management with Obsidian, and that fun stuff. All right, with that said, let's jump right in, shall we? Let's see. Let's see, actually, I closed the wrong thing. So what I currently have up right now is my Obsidian note for basically today's stream. And so for those who are new to Obsidian, if you haven't, actually, let me bring that window over here. So if you're new to Obsidian, basically, it's a note-taking app, and of course there are a ton, but my 10-second spiel to you on why Obsidian is really cool is because the data is yours. Data ownership, like you're not syncing it to some third-party cloud where someone might take advantage of your data for some unknown reason. Like it's a series of markdown files on your computer. That's it. Meaning it's plain text. It's not some garbled like database JSON that you can't understand and you lose it forever. Nope, it's just a bunch of markdown files. And so as a result, there's just a lot of possibility with it. But more importantly, you own the data, and whenever you need it, it's there for you. Don't have to worry about server outages and all that fun stuff. So that's my 10-second spiel on Obsidian. And so obviously we'll do more of that. But let's talk about the course, right? Because basically what we're trying to do today is, honestly, part of this is a bit of public accountability. Because if I talk about it here in the stream and I'm here with you for basically about an hour to an hour and a half, then we're going to talk through, get a lot of the sort of the legwork done, and then it'll just hopefully get me some momentum as far as just keeping that work going when we're offline. So the first thing first is when planning a course, I think what's really tricky, and for those who are creating content, it's always a kind of a tricky part of like, how do you manage all of these ideas? And so one of the things that Obsidian does really well is the fact that we have graph views, right? So if I open up the local graph view, you can see that this note alone is already connected to a bunch of different notes. And the reason this is really powerful when creating content, or especially something like education, it allows us like a visual representation of how we might expect things to add up to things. Whereas if you plan things out just as a list of things that people want to do, it's easy to lose track of how prerequisites play into each other. And so I thought it'd be fun to do some sort of course design while doing this as well. So first thing first, let's start by just figuring out how we're going to project manage this, right? Because especially for something like creating a course, if you're creating any sort of content where it's a bit more massive in scale beyond, like, for example, when we do the stream here today, I get to do it, we record it, I'll do a little bit of editing, post it up on YouTube, it's done. A course is just a lot bigger in scope as far as work. So it's not as easy to just call it like a checklist item in your to-do list. You certainly could, but I don't know about you, whenever a task is way too large in my checklist, basically never gets done. So we're gonna chunk it out, but rather than use some sort of like a third-party software like Todoist or something else to manage the project, I thought we'd go ahead and actually just utilize Obsidian for some project management, because frankly, why don't we use the tool, we can learn some stuff, and then on top of that, we'll do some course design. So let's start with that, shall we? So first things first is I'm gonna create an Epic Notes project. All right. Oh, not projects, actually I want project. The reason why I want it to be project actually, so let me do that one more time actually. All right, so I'm gonna create a brand new note, Epic Notes projects. All right, so what we're gonna see here is you'll see that my note has already been populated with a page template, right? And because I have this sort of base page template for how I manage projects, and the question here is, so okay, how do I put this? One of the challenges I've found when it comes to managing tasks is that you have a bunch of things that are related, but it's really hard to keep them like contextually in the right view. And so Obsidian does that really well because you can basically self-select the relationships that happen without managing like an entire database, which can be really nice. So Cassie has a question here. Do I have a template for project and projects plural? Actually, I don't have a projects one, but you know what I should do though, because that does happen on accident. So actually, let's take a look. If I go to my base note actually, because that has happened to me before. I have basically this sort of if-else statement for those who are new. And what it does is every time I create a brand new note, it will run through this really simple JavaScript in terms of it'll check for something, and then based on what it is, it will then render the correct template accordingly. And that way you're not always having to start from scratch or then manually insert it. And so what we can see here is that we have this, I've started getting in the habit of every time I put something like a project, like a parentheses at the end of the file, it'll help designate a type. So we can see here with projects, ooh, wait, where's my project? Oh, here's my project. If it includes project, it'll open the project template, but occasionally I do accidentally do the projects. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do a projects accident note. And so what this means is that in the event that I actually say projects instead, I'm gonna actually just create a little bit of automation to protect myself from it. So if the title includes projects inside of it, so the plural version of this, there's a couple things I wanna do. First thing first is we know for a fact we want to return this line right here, right? The project, we wanna return the project template. But the problem we're gonna have with that before we do anything else though is that the file title will automatically include the S. And so what we need to do is actually rename the said project. So what I need to do is, did I use a rename here? I could have sworn I actually renamed the file in here at one point. You can move the file, yes. Moving the file does rename it at the same time, I will say. But I want to see, actually, all right, we're going to Obsidian Data View. All right, so a couple things we're gonna learn. So no, not Data View, Templater. Okay, so even just in this exercise alone, for example, right? So here, let's see, success criteria. Let me do a clipboard to do, and let's see, establish curriculum. Okay. Before I'm gonna be jumping around a bit, so honestly, part of this is just honestly unfiltered planning the way I think. So you can see that I know a lot of times when it comes to content creation, or if you're looking at creators, it can look like everything's always put together. And part of the reason I have this stream is to share the fact that that's not how it always is. So if you're ever feeling insecure about your own content creation, like just know it can be a messy process. But what's fun about that is you get a chance to really explore different things and bring it all together. Oh, Improcrates, hello. Glad to have you join live. And as always, for anyone here, if you have any questions about the things I'm talking about, feel free to go ahead and drop that in the chat while we're here. Okay, so a couple of things I've learned from experimenting with Obsidian over time is that long notes tend to be very hard to manage, at least in my experience, because it just gets really chunky and then you start losing track of where things are. And then especially you want to dive into deeper into different notes, it gets tricky. So what I mean by that is normally you might expect me to create a note called Epic Notes, which is what I plan on titling the course. It could change, TBD, but for now I'm calling it Epic Notes. The problem is that when you put everything in one note, it's a lot for your brain to manage, and I would argue that information is relevant in different contexts. And so when you put everything in one note, you're combining all those contexts together. And at least for now, at least my current framework is to separate out these sort of major ideas into their specific context. So Epic Notes as a project will have its own note. This is then so let's see, we'll have the Epic Notes course, which will be the actual course itself. This is, call it the context of my education brain. This is where I'm gonna sit here and talk about the curriculum. I'm gonna think about what makes the most sense from an educational design perspective and so forth. And by breaking it down this way, it's a lot easier to dive in. Now, granted, you might be wondering, well, the problem is that none of this is actually being linked together. So one of the things we could very easily do, for example, is Epic Notes, for example, is already its own note that I happen to have. And because it's actually already, because of the brilliance, let's see, does it already do this? Let's see, talk about Epic Notes. No, that's not it. Okay, so it didn't actually link it. But what I can do then is I can basically, let's see, this is a bunch of stuff I had thought through at one point. Okay, here are some resources. So I'm just gonna link the Epic Notes project for now. And then we're gonna link the Epic Notes course. These are like some of the ways to keep them related. And so as a result, when I go ahead and look at the graph, you'll see Epic Notes is created to the project and the notes, which is great. That's what we want. And so what I like about this approach of having the parentheses be like a signifier as to what these things are is that you basically can focus on what matters to you in a given moment. So for example, we had just started talking about base notes and automating different things. So there's a couple things in the curriculum that already come to mind. One is like how to use Obsidian Templater effectively, or let's say how to use Obsidian Templater, right? So there's like a whole guide. People like to know how things work, but then usually there's, I don't know, call it like Ben's best tips. I don't know. I like alliteration sometimes, but ignore the best part. But Ben's tips, right? And so, for example, this will be like the base note with Obsidian templater. Because I think one of the things I find tricky about courses is a lot of times they tell you how to set things up, and that's great and all. Like you learn how to install it, you learn the basics of syntax and all that stuff. But then ultimately, why are we learning those things? Oftentimes there's an actual practical application that needs to be applied to this thing. And I think that's what's sometimes really tricky about teaching programming concepts. And I don't think note taking is all that different in that it's easy to go, you keep your notes modular and you keep your notes this. But part of the thing that makes it actually, that's really important to me on this course is that if you're spending the time to learn something, you're learning it because you're trying to solve a specific problem in your personal knowledge management system. And I think this is one of the things that courses tend to do poorly is because, especially if it's a linear course. So one of the things, there's a couple things. So like education, design, philosophy, right? So we talked about this. Education, I'll call it core principles. Everything learned in this course is meant to solve a real world problem that either myself or others have when it comes to note taking. Okay, so that's one thing that I want to hold myself to this principle. The other principle as well, to be honest, is I want to make sure that unlike traditional courses, follow a graph relationship of learning rather than linear. And this is going to be particularly tricky when it comes to how things are typically presented on a course website. Because frankly, a lot of times what is it, right? It's a YouTube playlist and you have different sections. And there's this kind of feeling of, I need to do it all, right? And let's be honest though, I don't know about you. Most of us who buy courses, we start pretty strong and then we fall off the course in the middle of the way. And maybe later we come back to check it out. Most of the time it's left incomplete. What if we're evolved on that concept, right? Let's grow that. And so what I almost like in an ideal world, let's just quick brainstorm here. Let me just brainstorm. What if it instead, again, when Epic Notes course is in its full complete form, you basically get a library to choose from of modules. And based on what you care about, that's what you add to your curriculum. And in terms of like your course progress in your account, that's actually what's tracked, so that when you say these 5 modules are what's relevant to me, that's what you'll put together. And then when you go to actually learn, that's what shows up. That's what practice is. And then you are done with the course when you've completed those things. I think that takes a much more, like that personalization of course progress would make so much more of an impact, I think, on making information sticky to people. To quickly capture what I just said, I said, don't rely on strictly linear. Students can choose. Oh, I've realized this thing is now down on my face. Okay, students can choose their own learning path. And again, you could argue that there are, don't get me wrong, actually, let me be very clear. I don't think I'm the first one to come up with this. There are different platforms that do this to varying degrees. The reason why I think this might be particularly interesting in this context is because I've purchased a lot of courses. Like if collecting courses and resources was like an Olympic sport, I don't know if I'd be Olympic level, but I'd be pretty darn high. I've collected a lot of stuff. And so when you buy you spend like X amount of dollars to purchase a course, you have this giant library. And I don't know, a lot of times for me, it's overwhelming to have this list of videos and like this giant PDF that like has the potential to upgrade my workflow somehow. And then let's be honest, I never get around to it. Whereas if the course platform, if the website could actually be anyone who buys this, I believe you should own the video. So there's that. So that aside, but if you want to manage your learning journey, which is what I think is one of the missing pieces to a lot of these sort of like buy your course and hoard the videos mentality, is that when you're allowed to go through and say, okay, like I want to pick this and put it together, I think there's a lot more motivation for you to then go through and say, okay, you know what? Let's say you buy the Epic Notes course. Then in the Epic Notes course, I would like people to be able to go, okay, you know what? I bought it for this month. And really though, I don't have that much time this month. I got a really busy work schedule. Family's coming to town. I'm going out. But I would like to finish this piece of the content. Let's say it's like getting my vault set up with like basics. Then honestly, there should be a way for people to set that and then set the month and basically be like, for this month, this is all I'm doing. And that way, when you've completed that, you can feel that level of accomplishment. And students can manage, this is similar to the second point, but for some reason it's resonating with me a little bit differently, so I'm just going to write that down because I can always delete and refactor it later. But students can set their own timeline deadline. I think that would be huge for students because it lets you personalize it. There can be recommendations, but then, so this thing actually is more about choosing modules, I think. Because here's the thing, right? For those who have used Obsidian, one of the, how do I say this? I won't call it controversial. Well, I'll say it's controversial because people seem to debate over it and get really heated over it. I don't know why. But daily notes is a great example of a concept where you need to understand what a daily note is. But when I say need to, maybe how do I, it's one of those things where as students, we tend to want to learn everything at once. And then a lot of times we just end up overwhelmed. So I would need to design the course in a way that like introduces them to high level, like what the module is before they commit to it. So in this case, I will have a module for daily notes because I think there's a whole philosophy and stuff that you can get with when you buy into the system of daily notes. Actually, I'll just call it periodic notes because it's more than just daily notes. There's weekly notes, quarterly notes, monthly. There's a whole thing with it. It's not for everybody. But here's the thing though, and this is why the graph relationship gets crazy, because when you have just a linear list of topics, if I group everything that's related to periodic lists under one module, this is tricky because to some people, they're going to be like, I only needed like lessons 2 and 6 from this. But to expect them to know that and to pick that out, I think that's not asking a lot. Of people are tired enough as it is in the day without having to like filter through this journey, especially when it's like really like chunky content. Oh no. I see him. Okay, hold up. 0x Nio. Shoot. My face is not showing up. Hang on. I can't believe I've gone this whole time without the camera. Here I was like speaking to the camera and anyways. All right. Let's thank you. Okay. Improcrates here. Let's see. Watching every stream. It's nice to see someone who develops real project using real life workflow and commenting on it at the same time. I'm glad that I could be part of that journey for you. I think honestly that's part of it for me, is that I do think a lot of social media and content these days is really filtered. It's heavily filtered. And I think there's a lot of philosophical commentary we can talk about when it comes to filtering content like that, because you can say, oh, you're not wasting people's time, etc. Again, I approach this always with the upfront, like the premise of this stream and a lot of the stuff I do is that this is raw, unfiltered. So for people looking for like the distilled format of content, I think there's more than enough people willing to do that. I have always believed in showing what the journey of life is like. It's messy sometimes. And I think, anyways, shoot, I'm diving into something that probably, you know what, I'm gonna do this. Okay, here's a live example of Obsidian where I need to jot down this concept, this talk, even if it's like a mini, like 10-minute thing. So what I'm going to do real quick is inside of here. So Improcrate's comment here is a reminder. So I want to talk about how do I distill this in like a title format. I would say the value of transparent chaos over filtered, polished content. This is very descriptive, right? But I would say in my mind right now, this kind of captures what I'm feeling as far as like what I want to get at. And so I'm just going to quickly, because this comment here like really resonated with me, I'm just going to drop that in real quick. So like this, and then the other thing I'm going to do here is, okay, so now I have this note, although what is that image? Oh, there you go. It's an embed. That's why I couldn't like highlight it. Is that this is a note, but more so than a note, let's see, status. This is something I want to look at in this future. So that's why I have a status backlog. However, where was it inspired from? Actually, or its origin. I have an origin one. The origin here is actually from this discussion today, PPH 12. Actually, did I not power hour 12? There we go. Okay, so this is good. This is good enough. And I think actually this is, at the moment, I have a series. So I'm creating a new series called Monday Musings, which is like my 10-minute philosophical rants that I'll probably be trying to record on Thursdays and then splitting them out into a separate like a YouTube series. But anyways, so there you go. So now in the future, what's nice about this, in case people are seeing this for the first time, is that the double colon here basically provides some like it's what they call inline field. So let me add this. Hold on. Data view, Ben tips, value. Let's see. Back matter with inline fields. The cool thing about the inline fields, which was for me, introduced by Obsidian Data View is that all these properties here are basically introduced as properties of the document later on for querying. So when you're thinking about notes and you're like, oh, like I want to look up notes that are tagged a certain thing or they're from a certain thing, this is an easy way to do that without clogging your front matter. That's basically what's going on. Okay, all to be said and done. Basically, thank you so much for sharing that comment. Honestly, this is something that's been on my mind for a bit, and I would love to see more people showing their workflow, and because it's very much, I think artists are the, I'm just gonna write this real quick. Artists is a great analogy for this, or metaphor for this. Where I think a lot of times when I think you see some drawing materials that are like, there's a really funny, oh, do I have the owl comic here? Let me see. Nope, no owl comic. So we're gonna show once again. Let's show Obsidian ins as is, let's see, owl draw comic. It's like a tutorial too. It's a funny meme if you haven't, basically a meme at this point. How to draw an owl. No, I don't want the video. I want the joke. Oh, here it is. Here's the joke. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this image, and what we're gonna do here is just drop this in here. So I just copied the image, and what it did, by the way, in case you didn't know, is that this actually creates a local version inside of your vault automatically. So this is not something that's cached from the internet. This is a straight up copied. So I can be like owl, let's see, owl tutorial drawing meme. I'll just do it like that. Great, now that's in here forever. And so I feel like a lot of times life content creation is like this. They're like, oh, you do this perfect circle, and then you do these perfect things, and then it's like the perfect owl. I think life is a lot messier than that. So it's why one of the things I really enjoy from things like TikTok and stuff is seeing when the artist actually starts from scratch. Like you're looking at it and you're like, how is that going to turn into something that looks good? Because it's just like random shading and you're just trying to figure it out. And I think, anyways, I think a lot of life is actually like that. So all that to be said and done. A little bit of a tangent. Let's see. Oh my gosh, Yuichi here, up from 5:30, watching from Japan. Oh my gosh, thank you for staying up. And then as always, again, I will make sure to upload what I can to YouTube. So in case you're not up, you want to have it running in the background in the future, I will be doing that for you. So, okay. What else do we got here? Okay, so we have a general curriculum, starting to get some high-level concepts here. Now, let's jump back into this idea of, actually, pull up. Let me open that note again. This course is, nope, what do I want? I want the project. The project is, oh, this is outdated. It's not for 2021, but it is actually no longer in backlog. This is something that is officially with this stream in progress, which is great. So basically I'll have a project dashboard that can queue this stuff up, which will be really nice. And honestly, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So this is a priority must have. Yep, so that's good enough. Okay, now let's jump back into the base note concept that we were dealing with earlier. So with base notes, we get the ability to like insert whatever we want, but we had this problem earlier where we had projects, right? What happens when you accidentally do projects? So in this particular case, what we need to do is we need to first rename the file, then inject the file with the template that we see at hand. So what we're gonna do here is look inside of Obsidian templater real quick. Let's see, there we go. Here's the official docs. It is too small. Let me bump this up. Great. Okay, I believe it's file content, file create new. Oh, we can create new. Okay, that's a new. So that's exactly it. I do think at some point there probably does need to be like a template or deep dive. I think that would be useful as a course. But in the sense of making epic notes and keeping things practical, I will definitely adhere to that. So if there's a function that I see that might help, then I will, or that I've run into and I've used, that's what I'll teach. And I'll point people to documentation for additional things, but otherwise I don't think we're gonna try to come up with an example for everything. All to be said and done, looks like we found what we needed here. tp.file.rename, it renames everything and then creates the new extension. Great. So what we want to do then is we are in JavaScript, so we can say that the cons title is going to be the, oh wait, do I already have the variable up here? I do, I did that already. Oh great, title equals tp file.title. So I can reuse that in here. So I can say const new title. Nope. How do I want to do this? Let's see. Let's talk this out. tp.file.rename. Oh, it has the autocomplete. That's beautiful. I don't know when they added this, but the fact that the documentation is showing up in this is pretty great. Okay, renames the file, keeps the same file extension. We just need to pass in the new title. So the new title in this case is going to be the file, but we're going to cut off. We're going to replace projects with project. That's the easiest way, I think, to approach this. So what we can do then is replace, let me see, this is a little risky, but we're gonna try it. Title dot replace, and what we're gonna replace is projects like this. So we replace this string with the project string. I think that'll do it. Hey, Zero Michi, how's it going? All right, so we're gonna find out if the project accident note shows up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna see like test project, test example projects like this, create, and then it aborted, it failed. Okay, why did it fail? It failed because templater parsing, missing argument after the list. So it might be a syntax thing. So if there's projects, tp.file.rename, tp.file.rename. Why doesn't it like this? tp.replace parentheses, comma here. Oh wait, there's an extra quote here. This is the tricky thing about the lack of JavaScript syntax is I don't see the obvious syntax error. So hang on, honestly, the fastest thing for me to do real quick is open VS Code. And we're just gonna drop this in real quick. TP file, yeah, I have way too many parentheses here. It looks like it's just this one. Okay, so I have an extra one. Good to know. That tells me that thing. Okay, let's try this again. Insert base note. It did a couple of things right. It renamed the file correctly. And then, however, in my project, I linked to the file directly. You can see this doesn't exist anymore because this got renamed. So it's interesting because it seems like the return actually happened before the file name. So before the file renamed. Whoops. What I want to do here is I think I can await this one first and then base note. That's it. Okay. So problem solved. Zero Michi. Oh, what are we working on? I'm getting off my butt and we are I'm designing the Epic Notes course content live. And so actually for anyone, if this is something you're interested in, I'd certainly love to hear from you as far as like different topics or questions you have about Obsidian that I can answer, because this course really is designed to be practical. I'm not trying to make it an encyclopedia of knowledge. I think for those that care for every single function, every single thing that it could do, that's great. There are docs for that, and there are other people who probably would be better at documenting that sort of thing. For me, I want to give you the most concise information I can that's practical, and then give you opportunities to practice those things within your notes. Because honestly, at the end of the day, the reason I'm creating this is because, one, I get a lot of questions about Obsidian, and so sometimes I find myself repeating the same things. But then otherwise, I don't think these techniques that I use should be limited to myself and those around me. I love other people to take it and expand on their knowledge base. And I know that there's a general question behind the value of personal knowledge management as a whole. PKMs is what is known in the field. And I think part of the reason is because there's a lot of fatigue from it. It's like, why am I going to spend all this time to get very little value out of it? And so I'm hoping that through this, for those that decide that Obsidian is worth the time, they can actually find ways to make it valuable for themselves while still spending time living their lives and not just merely just like spending time managing notes the entire time. So that's kind of like the high level piece here. Okay. So this worked. This is great. So we learned a couple of things with this, with the await keyword, renaming files, moving files. Yep, that's good. Okay, so now I never have to worry about accidentally calling it projects again. The only thing I have to worry about actually is one of the things I did poorly in this is that the file title is currently it's case sensitive. So if I type the wrong thing, it won't actually show up. So for example, laboratory, lowercase project. If I create this, nothing happens. So we're gonna fix this. And actually part of the things I wanna do before I forget is that info notes about notes. Oh yes, provide templates for people to start with. And there's a difference though. I've seen different types of templates offered to the community, and I think sometimes it's just way too overwhelming. Similar to how notes management is, where in my belief, it's about creating the most providing information in the most relevant context in a way that makes the most sense. In other words, What I don't want to do at the end of a course is throw you a giant boilerplate where you're, where do I start? For the way I'm designing this course, that would not achieve my goal. What will probably, like, there will be a template for people to look at, but otherwise, I think it's one of those, if you're looking, like if I have a module, or if I have a tip on the base note, you can see what mine looks like, and I'll include some key examples, but I won't overwhelm you with all this stuff that I have. For example, this is just way too much stuff. Okay. Let's fix this real quick though, in that, oh, actually, you know what? I need to delete this. Laboratory project is not necessary. Don't need that either. Okay, so ODAT Nerd here in the chat. Is tips on note layout and navigation out of scope? No, I don't see why not. When you say note layout though, and navigation, are you referring to like the ability to, I think they're two different topics, right? Note layout in terms of like different structures that are useful for different contexts is what I'm interpreting as note layout. So honestly, like I have different templates for, as you can see, I have a project template, one for courses, one for this, one for books. I think note layouts like that is worth a topic in it of itself because we're talking about note design. Really is what, at least that's how I'm interpreting this. So clarify that please clarify if you mean something different. I'm getting note layout, note design. Navigation. So what I'm hearing with navigation is navigation between notes in Obsidian, it sounds like. So how do you best leverage the fact that you have linked ideas between them? So if that's not what you mean, please let me know. Let's see. This is the first time I've seen Obsidian as a Sublime text guy. I see you using a lot of key bindings and command palette stuff to quickly move around, which seems quite interesting. Yes, this is actually the other thing about Obsidian that's actually really huge. Like it deserves a topic in and of himself, which is hotkeys. That's how I'm doing everything. And command palette. Like these two things combined are one of the reasons I also fell in love with Obsidian is because I don't have to memorize their UI. Like commands happen as they see fit, and I can customize hotkeys to how I'm already used to. So if I prefer to use Vim BIOS signings, I could. I can't attest to how well the Vim works in here though, but I do know that there are plugins that do exist for it. For note layout, seeing like best practices. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So best practices, actually, you know what though, for note design, this is more of a philosophical, this will be like a philosophical module. So for people looking to explore different types of, like when they're designing notes, I probably want to set them in specific context because it changes the discussion a lot in terms of your motivation. Are you designing notes to foster research? Are you fostering writing? Like you're writing a story, writing a book. Are you fostering connection between people? Because one of the things I do on here a lot is, so let me just actually do this a bit. Research, content creation, like, cause that's like a thing. What a connection. I use Obsidian to manage the relationships I have with people to not only help me better remember things, but also to help me better brainstorm things when it comes to things like gifts. And so that's like a whole thing in and of itself. But what's cool about you bringing this up though, is that it reminds me that there is this topic or like overview that needs to be covered when it comes to this. And so that is now as part of the agenda. But this is what I think is really nice about the philosophy I mentioned at the beginning, which is about letting people choose their own adventure in a way that actually makes it relevant to them. And what I think is cool about that, it means that epic notes will mean something basically slightly different to almost every single person. Because will there be people interested in taking it from top to bottom? I'm sure there will be. But what was more likely to happen, because a lot of us are working professionals or we just have other things going on with our lives, we're going to have specific relevant things going on. And in a perfect world too, let me actually go back to the epic notes projects. There needs to be like set up a email newsletter, for example. And so for people to be reminded of different techniques or to people to get motivated, because maybe at one point a certain module is not relevant to you, but if you get like the weekly newsletter and then you find out that, oh, by the way, there's this tip in here that's really helpful and you happen to have this problem now, then you can jump back in the module and then you can add that onto your journey with Obsidian.